switch this over. Safe, not sorry. No. There's got to be more. Where are we? Here, education. Okay, good. Now everyone's gotten a background view into what we do. This is the most important thing that we always do right before.
Make sure that the panels are flipped correctly.
That's correct. We try to make sure we're giving you the best experience we can here. No, we do like to flip through these. This is welcome, everyone. First of all, let me say thank you for joining us. This is our Unauthorized Caucus every Thursday. Mason Mohan, our intern here in St. Louis, is sitting in for Joanna, who is out this week. And I'm glad to have you here. Actually, this is a conversation that I've kind of been thinking about, and it's going to work really well because of your connection and where you go to school, your fiance, and what she's looking to do. And I think this will be a really good one. But we do, as we always get ready to fire this up every Thursday, we kind of look through the panels and see there's so much in this just tiny little encapsulation here of some of Phyllis Schlafly's mementos and some of her different certifications and awards and book covers. There's always something that relates to almost anything that we're talking about. So I love to flip it over. Today we're talking about education. So I pulled up here. This is a cover of her first reader, which she was very proud of the first reader system that she developed for young people to read, and then a turbo reader for any aged reader to get better, to go back to the phonics system, and to go back to the building blocks of what we can do to teach young people not just certain memorized things and the institutionalized, standardized things that have come into education the last 120 years, but really how to learn, how to be model, independent, successful and established citizens in America. So that's a little bit of what we want to talk about today. First of all, first of all, we've already talked quite a bit. Follow us if you don't mind. Like, share, and subscribe, please. Whether you're watching this on Twitter, hit the retweet, Facebook, share it with a friend. Send a direct message to someone and let them know, hey, I'm watching this and you should too, because these are the conversations we all need to be having with each other as conservatives before we even go out and then talk to folks who we don't just quite agree with and have to have those conversations that are going to be a little bit tougher. So make sure that you're following so you see it whenever we fire up live or any of the other things we post. And then also please share this with someone else. And we'll go ahead and dive right into it today. We'll try to keep it crisp. But thank you, Mason, for sitting in with me. And again, I'm glad that you're here because this actually goes into it. We've been talking a lot here. This week, of course, is kind of the dog days of summer since Congress was out. Not a whole lot's been happening. When the troublemakers go to vacation, it's just like all the news kind of spins up, which is kind of nice, but also terrifying because then you wonder what they're going to come back and do. So that's what we've been hunting around. You actually found a topic today that I hadn't come across yet, and this was the topic of our press release that went out. If you're looking through our social media, you would have just seen that a few minutes ago. But New York City, according to a court ruling, New York City is now paying out apparently close to $1 billion, and they've got another $800 million for future claims to teachers who were not able to pass the required liberal arts and sciences test for teacher licensing in the state. So New York City is having to pay out claims on that because a court said that violates someone's civil rights. Since minorities don't seem to pass it as well as white folks, it must be racist. So literally, quite literally, they are paying teachers to not know liberal arts in New York.
And what's weird is that it's still like 60% of, it's not like, all Black people and all, Latino people don't know the liberal arts. The vast majority of them still were passing this test. So it's not like it's a racial issue. Now, granted, there was a percentage disparity, which is why the civil rights claim went through. But, people are people and they're able to learn the liberal arts, and they should learn the liberal arts because this is the United States and this is the tradition that our country is built on. So they're able to do it, but now it's only Black and Latino teachers who were not qualified enough to be teaching children who are going to get paid out a total of $2 billion from the city of New York.
Yeah. And what this brought up, this is the conversation. These are terms that I don't know if we've ever gotten in trouble for it, but I know some congressmen or former congressmen like Steve King have for defending Western civilization, Western values. These things, of course, set off the woke meters of everyone out there on the left, because you're talking about, what they'll immediately run to is this racism or white supremacy. And it's just, first of all, it's patently ridiculous because we're talking about a value system, nothing that has to do with immutable characteristics. It has to do with choices, with choices of how we're going to interact with each other, how we're going to build and create and maintain societies. That's what this is built off of. So this really kind of gets into the heart of it, though, as we were looking at this story. I think that this ties in really well. One of the big divides that we have seen is 2021 in Virginia last year in the elections, Glenn Youngkin. I mean, that was the year of the parent, because the concerned parents, particularly in Loudoun County, Virginia, that got the most press. But concerned parents across the country were standing up and showing up to school board meetings and were causing a lot of disturbance to the education bureaucracy's normal and how they would just go along. And really, it exposed not only this conflict in that parents weren't as involved and didn't know what was going on. Again, one of the things that we're kind of thankful for COVID, the classroom came onto a screen into your home. So people who were completely unplugged as parents and didn't quite know what was happening finally saw it. And it allowed, I think, in big part, this conflict to come up. But what we're seeing now, and this and all the others, we're watching the education bureaucracy that, and we were just talking off camera before we fired it up, doesn't seem to care about children, doesn't care about really educating and raising young model citizens who are good, upstanding members of the community, functional adults who can perform a skill and a job and get paid and fill in a hole in society. What it's doing is this is the narrow conveyor belt style of what we want, standardized, this, that, and the other. We need these things. You need to know these things and no more. It's not even thinking for yourself. And then we move forward. And this is driven from these upper levels of a bureaucracy. It's really not even teachers themselves. We talk about this all the time. I hate to couch it, but we're not bashing teachers here. And most of the teachers I know go into the system wanting to do good things. The problem is, though, we're talking about a bureaucratic system that has been steeped now for over a century from the top down. And that's really kind of what we're, we'll just throw this out. We don't need to, have this. And you can say that someone came in with a woke racial view, but I mean, really, I think at the base, we all know that education bureaucracy is looking for a reason to, in one more way, not have to have this really be a part of the classroom anymore. We have an excuse to get rid of it. So as we watch that pull through, what do we do about it? And we have midterm elections coming up. So is 2022 going to be another year of the concerned parent for midterms? Will that drive it, do you think?
I hope so. I mean, this problem comes in the first place from people not being firm. It's like, oh, there's a teacher that wants to teach this about race or this about gender, and letting them into the schools. And because, it's good to be a nice person and somebody needs a job and, oh, they have some of the right qualifications. But especially 10 years ago, it wasn't as big of a concern if somebody had a liberal social view and gets into a teaching position. And this lack of firmness is what has led to it, and not just in public schools, but lots of private schools. And, there's like Catholic schools getting in trouble for having like the gay pride flag. It's like, what are you doing? And this comes from like us not being firm before. So, and I think a lot of parents are waking up to, oh, I don't want my kids raised in this. We're going to need a big change around in the way that education works. So hopefully they'll get out there and change that in the coming election.
Yeah, and I think, as many issues, as much as the left is making gun control and abortion and all these other things, although they didn't start abortion, the Supreme Court did, and rightly so, turned it back to where it ought to be in the lawmakers. But as much as these other issues are being brought to the top, I kind of wonder, and I have a strong feeling that concerned parents who finally have seen a little bit of the veil pulled back on the education bureaucracy, the state education system, I think that has been disturbing for a lot of people. And I kind of hope and pray that continues to drive them, because again, we talked about this. Joanna and I talked last week when it came to mass shootings and different things. It might sound trite to just talk about mental health or this or that or the other, but really what's happening to generations of young people who are not being raised with the same value system that even 1 to 2 generations ago Americans were raised with. We're starting to see the fallout from that. So, what greater priority, almost in a certain sense, what greater priority could there possibly be from a public policy standpoint that ought to be addressed, right? I think a lot of people are there. But then that brings us, going out and voting and changing school boards and changing state officials so we can work on this from that top down. That's changing the public education system. That all of that would be considered changing the public education system, which I think a lot of us probably may not think will ever fully happen, or if so, it's going to take a long time. So this brings us to some interesting things. Alternative education, which I know that used to be kind of a bad word. Alternative education was the weirdos. What kind of radical people are you looking for? But now, from classical schools that are popping up, Montessori schools, educational co-ops and resources, just pure homeschooling at home, there are a lot of different options out there. And 2020 led to one of the biggest mass exoduses of from public school that I've seen in a long time. And I say public school, let's be clear, I was just government school, from government school that I've seen in a long time. So that's leading a lot of young people to think about that. And that's actually, I mentioned this, I heard something from you that I'm not used to hearing. My wife and I talked about before we got married, okay, so when we have kids, what do we want to do? Or we have the same mind? And we decided we really wanted to do home education because that was, we could customize and tailor it for them, go at the right speed, also make sure we teach them what we do want them to learn, introduce the other ideas at our rate and in our way rather than just turn them loose to someone else and to a group of their peers. But I heard something similar from you, and I wondered if you wanted to talk about that, because I don't hear very many people our age anymore discuss that, let alone before they're married and actually have kids.
Right. Yeah. My fiance and I are fully planning on homeschooling. She's always wanted to homeschool and has always had a passion for education. And I've always had a passion for education, but more in the just hating public schools aspect. She, on the other hand, really likes to actually teach and help people learn. So she's been working in classical schools and been doing lots of tutoring. She's actually has used the first reader, and it has been extremely successful. So because I'm looking at the world, and I hated public school and she hated public school, and it is terrifying because it's only getting worse. Quarantine's over, now the kids are back in and the parents aren't listening anymore. Because my little brother sent me about a year ago, when in-person school was back, a bunch of essay prompts for his English class that he had to write an essay on at least one of them. And the whole thing was LGBT gay stuff that he had to write about one of them. And I was like, this is insane. And that's in Texas, the state that banned critical race theory. So if they can still get away with this kind of stuff there, like, it's only going to get worse. Especially by the time I have kids and by the time that they're school age, I don't want them, with some blue-haired liberal teaching them about pronouns in first grade. Like, no, thank you.
Careful now. I'm getting personal with the blue hair thing. I've seen at least one that didn't have blue hair in the libs of TikTok videos recently. But really, no, it is. It's interesting to hear, and this is why I'm kind of curious, because you're the closest thing in our office right now to school. I see the closest thing. You're the closest person. No offense. Interns have feelings, folks. No, you're the closest person to primary and secondary level, schooling in this office, and it's really kind of it's interesting to hear, because as folks with values systems well put down, a good foundation laid by a good family, go through that and come out the other side not completely brainwashed and indoctrinated. You actually escaped into a good school. You're a rising senior at Hillsdale, and your fiance is a rising senior as well. So you and your family's made a good decision to make a sharp turn away from just the standard process going up. But it's interesting to hear your experience, and then your siblings. I hadn't even thought about asking that, but if you guys are in the public school system down there, Texas or not, of course you're in a city, it's just pretty nakedly left wing, and the ideological indoctrination that's going on, it has nothing to do with learning anymore. It only has to do with memorizing an agenda, not with learning the building blocks that build you into a citizen who thinks for themselves and functions on their own. So that's interesting. And your fiance, for you guys wanting to do homeschooling, she's actually got education training. That's part of one of her minors, right? Or is her minor, and she works with classical schools now. So that's kind of interesting that she would go that route. Does she? And this is just, I'm curious, because I was listening to a podcast today about a guy who has started alternative educations. He left the public education system, government education system. Excuse me. I'm working on making sure I say that every time. He left the government education system to start. It's not Montessori, but it's very, very similar, something like that, small, independent, learner-led schools. And I'm always kind of curious when I hear that pop up, because it just doesn't have to be homeschool or public school. There's all these new options that are out there. So does she want to do something for, a career or working in that field while homeschooling at the same time? Or is that just something to do while she's looking forward to homeschooling and something else? Or does she want to actually maybe go into that and make waves in America kind of thing to raise up these alternative forms of education?
Yeah, well, right now the plan is she'll work in the education system until we have kids to educate of our own. But we'll see what the future holds. It could just
You're not suggesting she would quit her job and be a stay-at-home mother.
I do think that is what more Americans need to learn.
Probably right.
Yep. But But yeah, classical education really is a wonderful thing, and Hillsdale does offer a classical education minor, which comes with the classical education learning certificate.
What do you define? Why don't you define that for me, according to your? Because again, I was just having this conversation with someone else. You know, that's what we do. This is a conversation amongst all of us. And someone said, "What is classical education?" And I kind of wondered. I thought, you know what? Is that like a big C classical? Is there a legitimate definition that I'm just unaware of, or is it kind of, can it be a small C classical, referring to a generality of a kind or a style, or what is classical education? Why don't you define that for us according to your understanding? Hillsdale does a lot of that, or has a lot of connections.
Well, I do think it's both. I think there's both big C and little C. It is a defined thing, but it's also has a little bit of just a tendency that schools can adopt. But it's the idea of basing our education around a unified program based on Greco-Roman and Christian thought throughout the last few millennia, which have culminated in the civilization that we have today, and looking at everything through that lens and not seeing things as just a bunch of fragmented little things. Because at Hillsdale, I'm always seeing connections between classes, even at things as foreign to one another as like biology and great books, as crazy as it may sound. But that's the point of classical education, that education has a point, that education is supposed to shape and form a person and turn them into something better, somebody who is capable of opera civilization. And I know that shaping and forming a person is sometimes kind of a dirty word when we're talking about these government schools with progressive education, but I don't think it's such a bad thing when we're shaping people to live in a world that's built on a legacy over 2,000 years. And they need to learn that legacy. They need to learn the great books. They need to learn, why math is important, who the great mathematicians were, and what they thought about the world, and more than just mathematics. But also know mathematics, because it's not useless. And that's the point of classical education.
Yeah, thank you. That's good. And it sounds almost like you're describing Western civilization. That we're studying Western civilization as a whole, a connected item.
Right.
There's another callback to what we were just talking about. Well, that's good. Well, I appreciate that. And again, as we were just talking about it, we looked at this. We were looking at this article this morning talking about this, and I was listening to a podcast, and we've kind of talked about before. I mean, we've almost not quite lost sight of it, but I know that we were talking a few months ago before the latest round of left-wing gun control has come up, before the Dobbs decision came up, which we've talked a lot about the last few weeks. We were really kind of pounding the drum of concerned parents will drive the midterm elections. And honestly, I mean, I think we're probably abortion and gun control tie into that too, because it's concerned parents who are looking at it saying, you're using my school children as bait to take guns off the street. You're not actually trying to make our schools more secure.
Right.
They're taking away your abortion clinics. So now the next big push, Bridget Van Means is a big fan of reminding everyone, the next big push is for the, through the mail drugs, abortion pills, to take the place of procedures. Well, we already know that when it comes to government schools and counselors, kids are medicated without the consent of parents all the time. There's also antidepressants, all sorts of things. You don't think that abortion pills are going to become a very big part of the conversation there. All of these things tie back to the fact that as a society over the last 120 years, we've just kind of been indoctrinated into this idea, well, this is what education is. We just turn our kids over. They do this. And I think it is high time that people question that across all these issues. And I really do think that is still going to be one of the driving factors behind midterms. And I don't think that runs in favor of anyone on the left, who really is kind of at every point your child is being used instead of raised, which as a parent, that's what you want to do. You want to raise your child to be their own person. They are a cog in the system, a peon to the government, or a political pawn to be used for points in Congress. I think that holds true. This will be one of the big issues, I think, throughout all of this year.
Right. And hopefully it marks a shift in the way that parents and children view their relationships in America, because we've been in a rapidly changing world, especially with, the capitalism just growing so much, and 40-hour work weeks with both parents going to work. The easy thing to do is just, there's public schools, send your kids to public schools. And that made sense at the time. You can't really blame anybody for doing that. But now we're seeing that hasn't really been working. So we need to go back to parents actually raising their children and getting involved in their education and thinking about the decisions and making them, because these educational decisions will form the child for the rest of their life.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is the future of our nation. It goes without saying. Well, this sounds like a good place to put a cap on it and let everyone know about a very cool thing that's coming up. In light of how important education is, how much it's going to drive the elections this year, of that much we're confident. Let me then tell all of you, some of you are likely familiar with the Education Reporter. That has been a publication from here, out of Phyllis Schlafly's organizations since 1986, the newspaper of education rights since 1986. It has served as a great watchdog over government education. It's also served as a great resource for parents who are seeking alternatives and who move into that. So the Education Reporter has existed as a monthly newspaper. It moved over to digital some time ago, into the 21st century, but it has always been subscription based. We're doing something special this summer as we are looking forward to get back to school, which is going to be on a lot of people's minds here this month and next month as schools get to go back in. We've decided to make it free. And we've decided, instead of being a monthly publication where once a month you get all these comprehensive things built together, our editor, Sue Kunstman, who is been a wonderful resource and addition to our Eagle staff and family here for several years, she is going to be putting out this great content on a weekly or every other week or every week and a half so basis. So not only is it going to be as important and as comprehensive as it ever was, but it's going to be even more timely than it was even once a month. So that is happening starting today. This afternoon, we will be launching the new digitized website that now has the paywall taken off for the summer, and you're going to be getting articles at a very rapid pace every few days, every week or week and a half or so. And that is going to be, I think, a huge resource, because this is such an important issue. We want to make sure that this kind of information gets into the hands of everyone possible who's looking for it. So we've always talked about gifting a subscription to a friend. Please make sure you're letting people know that that's coming. We would love for you to do that. So I'm going to tell you, this is our last thing. Go to phyllisschlafly.com. If you're not already signed up for our email list, a little top bar up there, sign up. Give us your name and email address. You will get notified this afternoon when that goes live and it's out there. And we would love for you to join us in sharing that and getting all of the parents that you know who are concerned about their kids, concerned about the future of America, whether they're talking about alternatives or just what to do to go and clean up their own school district, get them to join us in bringing the Education Reporter into their home and educating and arming themselves to go out and save America, starting with our kids. So thanks for joining us today. Thank you, Mason, for sitting in for Joanna. Appreciate your perspective, and I appreciate you being here this summer. He's been doing great work with us, and we're happy to have him and happy to have a good connection, too, with Hillsdale, who always produces wonderful young men and women. So thank you, everyone. Go and sign up at phyllisschlafly.com. Like, share, and subscribe here on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, wherever you are. And we will see you next Thursday for another Unauthorized Caucus.